So in this video, I'm going to show you how to import 3D models for chuck jaws, chucks, collets, and collet chucks. So this is done in a mill turn environment. The machine I'm using here is this DMG Mori NLX 2500. So this is a dual spindle machine, single turret. So whenever I select my mill turn environment, as you guys already know, or if you don't know, CAD-CAM launches. What I want to do here in CAD-CAM is I want to go over to my components library, and I'm selecting inch because that's the units I work in. So I'm going to right click here and open. So what this does is it opens a session of Mastercam with my component library open. And we'll just give this a few seconds. Alright, so this is my component library. One thing I am doing, or one thing I do, and this is a tip for you, is I have a separate session of Mastercam open. I actually have two. And here I have it's Mastercam 2020. All this is just my step model, and I want this here because maybe I need to check dimensions. So again, just a tip, have your solid models open in a different session of Mastercam so you can take measurements. Okay. So since I'm adding a chuck and collet, what I need to do is I need to right click here on component library, go to groups, and I need to create a new group for my collet chuck and my collets. Okay. So those are treated separately. So hit OK there, and there you see my two groups. Okay, so let's start off with I'm adding a 10-inch chuck. So I'm gonna right click here where it says chuck group, and I'm gonna select add chuck. So I'm using a solid model. So for my geometry here, I'm gonna right click, select solid entity. Okay. Now down here, I'm going to open component model. Takes me to the folder where I have my 3D models. And I'm selecting my new 10-inch chuck. Okay. Remember to follow the prompts. So here it tells me select one solid. Okay. Here it tells me select component solid to center on the Z-axis or validate. Normally what I do is I select the back edge, so the edge of the back of the face. I should say the back face. Okay. Right, that looks good. So the Z orientation is correct. If it was wrong or if it's set wrong, switch it to opposite. Okay. Now, one thing I want to do is I want to time this jaw or this slot here. So I want it to be at 0. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on the red arrow and I'm going to clock it. So 60 degrees is right. Right. Boom. Okay. So here's a window previewing my chuck. Number of jaws here, 3, that's correct. Channel width, 625. Okay, so most of this information is filled in automatically. One thing that is not filled in is the channel depth. So here what I want to do is, looking at the other session of Mastercam here, I have that measured out. So that channel depth is 1 inch 187. Okay, so we'll type that in. And all this is good. I'll just click through it just to double check. Cool, that looks good. Over to parameters. So here set your minimum and maximum spindle speed. So I'll max this out at 2500 RPM. Leave this the way it's set, so no reason to change this here. Clamping distance, we'll leave it the way it is there. One thing to check is the allow through stock. So this allows you to bar feed or bar pull. Okay, so let's give this a name. Okay, and we'll save that. So there's my new 10-inch chuck. Now let's add my jaws. Okay, do the same thing here. Right click, add chuck jaws. Okay, and again we're working with solid models, so let's select solid entity. Click on the open folder. Now I have my models all together, right? So my file is an assembly file, so that's probably the best way to do it. That way you're not trying to manage multiple files. So I keep my models all together. Okay. Now I'm selecting this top one here. Okay. Now it tells me, let me put this in the correct place. So to align the chuck jaw, so it tells me to select a chuck jaw face. I'm selecting the back. Okay. And off the bat, that's correct. I don't need to change the orientation in Z or in X. Okay. So let's hit the green check mark. The summary here, it's pretty much the dimensions of my jaw. One thing I did do is I combined these two solid models, so I did a Boolean. You don't need the bottom piece. I just did it just for aesthetics, just because it looks nice, but really all you need is the jaw. So you really don't need this bottom portion. However, I did, so no big deal. Okay, that looks good. Boundary definition method, for anytime I do a turn profile, I'm always selecting spin. I rarely ever go with slice, unless it's just turning work. Most of the lathe work I've seen has some milling involved, so I don't like to do a slice for a boundary definition. Always spin. Alright, so this looks good. Let's go over to parameters. In here, my clamping method is on the OD. My reference point is this red X that you see here. That looks good. So if I needed to adjust that, I can just simply click there. It takes me here to the Mastercam screen. There's my outline of my jaw. And if you see, I'm just hovering my mouse over the outline and it's tracing it with this red dot. Okay. It does snap to points. So if you needed to change that, use reference point. So here, I think we're all good. I'll hit the green check mark. Oops, let's go back in there and update the name here. So let's say okay. All right, now in case you wanted this to be your default chuck, what we need to do is go down here to this bottom window. Okay, we need to remove the default one. So if I right click here on chuck jaws and go to view component and parent, you can see this very basic model of my chuck. I want to remove that, so I'm going to right click on the chuck itself and I'm going to delete component and children. So the chuck is my component and the jaws are the children, or child I should say. So click and drag your new 10-inch chuck. Okay, and click and drag my chuck jaws right below that. And you can see that icon change, right? Obviously if you see that icon, that's a no-go. Looking for that icon there, that blinking icon. Alright, so now let's right click here and let's say view component, and it's actually right click on the chuck jaws, sorry. Say view, component, and parent. And that's what I'm looking for. So right now you see that the jaws are closing in on themselves. Not a problem. This changes when I go through my job setup, right? When I set my stock diameter, the chuck jaws will open up. So, okay. So once I do this, and I'm going to do my, in the next video, I'm going to load my collet. But what I'll do here is I'll hit save. Okay, make sure that gets stored. If I go back to Code Expert, you'll see in that GMD file, there's an asterisk at the end. This is to let me know that there's a change and I need to save it. So I save it up here. All right. So in the next video, I'll do the collet.